Welcome to the Renaissance Achiever with Sarah Fui. Today I'm going to be talking about your zone of genius and why you should be living in your zone of genius. So there's this book by Gay Hendricks called The Big Leap. And in this book, he talks about how everything that we do can be categorized into four different zones. The four zones are the zone of incompetence, the zone of competence, the zone of excellence, and the zone of genius. And I'll explain each one to you in a little more detail. So, the zone of incompetence is what you are not good at, things that don't come naturally to you. Some people are just not naturally athletic. That is their zone of incompetence. My zone of incompetence is spreadsheets and administrative organizational things. Like, no, that's not me. I can't do it. My brain doesn't work that way. So, everyone has a zone of incompetence where maybe it comes easier to other people and you can't do it. And there's a lot of frustration and irritation in having to do these things. The next zone is the zone of competence. You can do something well in this area, but also maybe it's something that a lot of people can do well. And so you're competent at it. You wouldn't say you excel or stand out for doing this thing, but you're able to do it. For example, maybe it's a retail job that you start out having when you're young. A lot of people, different people can do it. You're good at it. You're competent, but you don't feel like you really excel or stand out, and you don't necessarily feel fulfilled in doing this work. It's just kind of boring and it's a means of making income, right? Then you have your zone of excellence. And this is something that you're very skilled at, you're really good at, that you stand out and you're known for. And maybe you receive financial success for it. And you also receive some social status or recognition from other people like, wow, she's known for doing that and she's really good at that. So, a lot of professionals, like a medical doctor or an attorney. For me, I was a licensed psychotherapist. I have my master's in social work and I became licensed in mental health therapy. And I really feel like that is my zone of excellence. I'm really good at it and able to help clients, and it just comes really naturally to me. Then the fourth zone we have is your zone of genius. And your zone of genius is an innate talent, and it's your deepest passions, and it's aligning what you're really good at with what you love to do. So when you're in your zone of genius, you experience this flow state. You feel so much purpose and fulfillment, and you just feel like it's your calling. I love that word calling. So I'm going to equate it with your calling is your zone of genius. Now, everyone's zone of genius is going to be completely different. So there's no hierarchy of certain careers or tasks that are better than others that qualify as zone of genius type stuff, because it's going to be different for everyone. And what might be my zone of incompetence is someone else's zone of genius. So you can't really compare and saying that someone is more of a genius because of what they're doing. It's just a very personal journey of what you're a genius at. I hope that's making sense. So one of the pitfalls of being in your zone of excellence is a lot of people don't realize that there's another level for them, that they could be stepping into their zone of genius. And so they're capping themselves at their zone of excellence. I've worked hard, I've gotten here, I'm successful, I'm known for this. And so they think that's the end of their story. But the problem with that is they're feeling really unfulfilled and they're feeling like there's no growth. And they know that they're made for something more, but they're not sure what, or they're kind of scared to step into what that might be because they get really comfortable in the zone of excellence. And I think our society really likes to praise people for being in this safe zone of excellence. And for anyone who wants to be a Renaissance achiever and do things outside the box a little bit and step into their zone of genius, there's a lot of pushback in maybe you're crazy, or that's not a good idea, or that's too risky, or it's impossible, right? All of those fears and limiting beliefs from other people come in when people want to step into their zone of genius. So, for as an example, for me personally, I think the zone of excellence is really my career, right? I did the traditional route. I got educated. I got my master's degree. I got licensed and I became a professional in what I did. And I really loved it. I love the work that I do as a therapist. I love helping clients. I love trauma and healing that. And I also was getting burnt out. And I knew that I didn't want to stay in that place forever. And I also have this very different creative side of me. I'm a singer-songwriter, and so my whole life I've been writing music. I used to sing in a reggae band and gig all over. I record songs, and I have a few songs that play on the radio in Hawaii, and just music is a passion for me. And theme that I came up with in all of my music is that I have a desire to instill hope in other people, a message of hope in my music, a message of hope in my therapy, even in my podcast. My whole desire is to give people hope that they could be living a happier or more fulfilling life than they are currently living and opening their mind to different possibilities. So I feel like this whole message of mine is hope in all these different areas of my life. And I think often the zone of genius is finding a way to blend those different skills and passions together to create what your calling is. And so for me, a few years ago, I realized that I really enjoy public speaking, and I was given opportunities to do some workshops and speak at church, and I actually really enjoyed it. And I thought, I want to do more of this. And back in 2021, so this was almost 4 years ago, I was sitting in my living room playing guitar, and I had this thought. I thought, I want to speak to people like on a stage. I want to be a motivational speaker, but I also want to play songs. So I want to share a story, a powerful story, and then an inspirational message tied to that story, and then sing a song that just drives the emotion even stronger. And then, share another story and inspirational message and then sing another song like that. I want to do that on a stage and I want to get paid for it, but I don't know what it's called and I don't know how to get into that. So I had this idea, almost 4 years ago. And I was working with an administrative person helping me with my social media and my business. And she was trying to help me to pitch this idea, but we didn't know what to call it. We didn't know how to reach out to people. And I put myself on a limb and I was asking for opportunities. And either people ghosted me or I got no's. Like nobody wanted to hear from me. And I was just trying to do this for free. Okay. But I just felt so strongly called to this. Like I'm supposed to do this. And so I was just kind of fearless and putting myself out there. Well, about a year and a half after that epiphany that I had in my living room, I was attending an indie music conference. So it was a CD Baby conference. CD Baby distributes songs. So if you're a singer-songwriter, you record songs, you upload it to CD Baby and it distributes it to Spotify and iTunes and Apple Music, Amazon Music, all of that. So CD Baby was holding a conference for independent artists in Austin, Texas in 2022. So I got to attend this conference and there's all these different workshops and presenters. And there's this one guy named Tiamo who was speaking, and he was talking about keynote concerts. And basically, keynote concerts are you give a keynote speech where you deliver this motivational message, and then you also play music to enhance your message. And I was like, oh, that's what it's called. Keynote concerts. I knew I was supposed to be doing this. I didn't even know that it was a thing. And I didn't know it had a name. And so he teaches artists, musicians how to pitch themselves as keynote speakers who also happen to play music rather than I'm a musician trying to perform music, because it's a whole different ball game. So I took some courses and a mastermind from Tiamo in learning how to create keynote concerts and how to market yourself as a keynote speaker. And I just felt really called to do this. However, I didn't really have the opportunity to do it yet. And I have experience playing music. I sang in a band, like I said. So I had experience performing as a musician. I had experience speaking, but I didn't have experience in doing this keynote concert that I really felt was like my zone of genius. Well, last month, I attended an event called Align. I talked about it in an earlier podcast with Brooke Hemingway. She hosts this 3-day event every January, and it is inspirational. It is about personal development and growth and expansion and stepping into your calling. And she brings in like some top level keynote speakers. And she gave me an opportunity to deliver a keynote concert on her stage. And I always have room for improvement because it was my first one, but I felt in flow. I felt in flow. I was combining my personal storytelling with my knowledge in personal development, entrepreneurship, and growth and healing, even in trauma healing as my background in therapy, with my skill as a musician, a singer songwriter, and vulnerably sharing my music on an emotional level, and just combining all that together, I was like, this is my calling. This is my zone of genius. And the thing is, I could say, hey, I'm a great therapist. I'm a great coach. I transitioned from therapy to online entrepreneurship and coaching. And even that, I love doing it. And it's such a different ballgame from therapy, but I still feel like that's my zone of excellence. Because when I'm just one-on-one meeting with a client, like it lights me up. Don't get me wrong. I love it. It lights me up. I could do this forever. And at the same time, I know that I'm capped. I'm capped in the amount of income I can make and the amount of time that I can give in a one-on-one session with a client. However, I am starting to expand in different areas with like group coaching and retreats. And actually, it's interesting because the whole theme of one of my group coaching programs with my retreat is helping women to step from their career, to transition from their career into their calling. So moving from their zone of excellence into their zone of genius. And that's the expansion that really lights me up. These in-person things, right? The connection with people, delivering keynote concerts where I can impact people on a larger scale and combine all these different parts of me into one moment and one delivery, right? So everyone has a zone of genius. And there's a interesting research study I want to share about. I'm going to read it because I don't want to get it wrong. So back in 1968, there was a research study conducted by George Land and Beth Jarman, and they designed a creativity test for NASA because they wanted to help identify who could be innovative engineers or scientists for NASA. So they later adapted this test for a study on children's creative potential. How can we find creative geniuses in children, right? So they used 1,600 kindergarteners at the age of 5, and they took the test. 98% of these 5-year-olds scored at the creative genius level. They followed these same children as they aged, and they tested them at age 10. Only 30% scored at the genius level just 5 years later. So they took this same group and they tested these kids again at age 15. The percentage dropped to 12% at the genius level. And then when adults who take the test, their average age was around 31, only 2% of adults around the age of 30 scored at a creative genius level. How crazy is that? So creativity and genius is not something that's learned. It's something that's unlearned, probably by our outdated public school system. Don't let me go on a tangent on that. This is why I homeschool my kids. One of the main reasons I homeschool my kids is so that they don't get the creativity pulled out of them by this conformity and boxing in a way that doesn't meet their individual needs. And not to diss teachers, I think teachers are the most amazing heroes in our society and selfless, but they're having to operate in this container that just doesn't work. It doesn't work for our current model of technology and society at all. And so most kids, 98% of 5-year-olds, are creative geniuses. If you are listening to this podcast, you are probably a creative genius. Or at one point in your life, you were, and you lost some of those skills by being boxed into what you should be doing in your zone of competence and your zone of excellence. So, my invitation to you is to decide, am I going to claim back my genius? Am I going to find that genius again? And the problem is so many people think that the zone of genius is something that's impossible or risky or unrealistic, but it doesn't have to be. You just have to decide, is this something that really lights me up? Does this bring meaning to my life? Am I good at it? Can I help others with this? And if so, like, go and do that thing. Be in your zone of genius. You know you're in your zone of genius when you're in flow, when you feel aligned and fulfilled. It doesn't mean that it's easy, because there's always going to be hardships in whatever you pursue, especially if it's, out of the normal typical career path, right? There are going to be hardships that you come across. Being in your zone of genius doesn't mean it's easy, but it means it's fulfilling and it's worthwhile doing. And so I want to encourage you all to really contemplate, what are the things that really light me up? What are the things I used to love doing as a kid? What are some things that time just stands still when I'm doing it and I'm just in flow? And how can I incorporate this more into my life? And a lot of people get stuck on this. They're like, well, I love hiking. I can't make a career out of hiking. Okay, so actually, some people do make a career out of hiking. You could do guided tours or whatever, right? But the thing is, you don't have to figure out how to make money with it right away. You just have to start doing that thing. The first step is bringing the thing that lights you up back into your life and your regular practice so that you are in flow more, you are in your zone of genius. And that's when the insights and the ideas, the light bulb moments will come to you. And as you start to walk on the way appears. That's one of my favorite Rumi quotes. As you start to do one thing, it leads to the next and the next and the next. So you don't need to have the whole plan of how can I turn what I love to do into a career. You just have to start doing that thing that you love to do and let things unfold from there. But make it a part of your life and not feel like it's a waste of time or that it's just a hobby or it's just, I don't have time for that because I need to work, work, work in my zone of competence or my zone of excellence. It's allowing yourself to be in that creative flow. I really hope that more people will start stepping into their zone of genius, because that is how we create a society of happy people, of fulfilled people. So, my invitation to you is start exploring the possibilities of what your zone of genius is, and don't get stuck in the zone of competence or the zone of excellence when you know that it is no longer aligned with who you are. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next week.